Good. Welcome.
Okay.
Welcome to session 4 of Anything But Ordinary Bible Study. And tonight we are looking at Jacob's encounter with the divine, encountering the divine out of the ordinary.
I have a dream. I will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama with its vicious races, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all shall see it together.
Oh, sorry about that, folks. I tested it and it was all working, and it's working on my computer. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So that was intended to set the theme of dreaming, which is, of course, central to the biblical passage that we're looking at today. But we're going to start with the question, who are the dreamers? Martin Luther King was a famous dreamer of the 20th century with the vision that he was articulating there. Who are the dreamers in the Bible?
And these are people who had actual dreams, not just articulated a dream, as it were.
Apparently, he got his speech because a lady in his congregation said that she had a dream about this.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes, so somebody had a dream.
Yeah. So who had a dream in the Bible? Who are the dreamers of the Bible? Can you name any?
Joseph,
Yeah.
Yes.
and maybe even Samuel, if hearing God's voice. I don't know whether that's
Two Josephs.
There's two Josephs. Yes, Sherry's right. No, it doesn't. Having an epiphany or a theophany isn't the same as a dream, which is Samuel's was one of those.
right.
What's a theophany?
Theophany is the voice of God speaking to you, and epiphany is a revelation from the divine.
Right.
They're very similar. It's just one is like a direct communication from God. The other's kind of moderated.
Was it Herod's wife or Pilate's wife? I can't remember which.
Yes, that's right. Pilate's wife did have a dream in the Gospel of Matthew.
Yeah, I've forgotten about that one.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth?
Cousin of Mary.
Did she have a dream?
Or did she she understood that she was going to have this child?
She did understand it. I'm not sure it says specifically that she dreamed. Yeah.
Well, the other way of God communicating is by sending an angel, which we'll come to later in tonight's session.
That's right. It's a bit of a trick question. Well, another one is Abimelech of Gerar, who heard from God in a dream. And after Jacob's dream at Bethel, Jacob has another dream. So Jacob gets to dream twice, urging him to return to Isaac in the land of Canaan. God appears in a dream to Laban, conveying instructions which Laban ignored. We met Laban last week. I think it was last week. He's the brother of Rebecca. And of course, we have Joseph, and there's one other very famous dreamer in the Old Testament.
Daniel?
He's got a book named after him.
Yes, Daniel. Someone said Daniel.
Yes, Daniel. That's correct. So both of these men, Joseph and Daniel, not only dream dreams, and Jacob, but they offer interpretations. So Joseph interprets dreams, and Daniel does as well. And both were interpreting dreams, often of a foreign ruler. So I guess that they've taken their dreaming a step further in the fact that they can say what they mean or say what someone else's dreamed were meaning. So, and we've mentioned, and Peter has a vision. It's not quite a dream, but he says he has a vision where, of course, he sees all the animals being lowered down
Mm.
and God has declared everything clean.
But he does quote Joel about people seeing visions and
Dream.
dreaming dreams. Yeah,
Yes,
as
he
a work of
does.
the Spirit. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Another thing to set the context for this this story is to ask where Jacob is. The text says that he left Beersheba and he went toward Haran. That's traveling north. Now you can see on the map, I can't see because this thing's in the way. Haran is right up the very top there, in the top right-hand corner, and Beersheba is right down in the very bottom of Israel, or almost the bottom of Israel.
The long walk.
Haran was actually the place that Abram and Sarah had left on their journey toward the land of Canaan back in chapter 12, because God had promised the land of Canaan to Abraham. And so they left there, which was their homeland, and traveled south. So, interesting geography. The journey that the Jacob's undertaking as this story is set, is a reversal in direction, a reversal in orientation of the earlier journey that his grandfather and grandmother had taken. And he was traveling, of course, as the text makes it clear, and this is in the very beginning of the excerpt you've got in your notes. He was traveling to escape the anger of his brother Esau because he had tricked Isaac into blessing him, Jacob, and giving him, Jacob, the second-born, by a few seconds, but nevertheless the second-born, with the inheritance that was rightly owed to Esau, the firstborn. So Abraham had traveled south in order to receive God's blessing. Jacob travels the other way, north, after he has deceitfully gained his father's blessing. It's a nice, neat reversal. We're told that understandably Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him, that he threatens to murder his brother once the days of mourning for my father are completed. So learning of his hatred, Rebecca, remember how Rebecca was so instrumental in things in earlier stories? Rebecca advises her son, flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away. So Isaac advises him to go north, but has Rebecca told, set the train rolling by telling Jacob that he needs to go north. At any rate, that's the journey, and he does eventually come back down, of course, as this map shows in Genesis 31, 32, and 33. So a little bit of symbolism in the context. And now the other part of the...
So the key thing we're looking at here is, the key thing at this moment is Jacob dreams there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. So we're going to have an angel trivia section. To whom do angels appear elsewhere in the Bible?
Well, when Jesus was born,
Yes.
Moses?
Mary.
Yeah. In the Gospel of Luke. Yep. Where else are there angels?
Abraham and Sarah?
Yes. Angels came to Abraham and Sarah to tell the very ancient Sarah she was going to have a child.
Hagar.
Hagar, yes.
Gabriel came to Mary. Was it
Gabriel came to Mary, that's right.
in Revelations?
There's a lot of angels in Revelation, and some of them are very strange. They really are with the descriptions.
Monkey-headed.
Moses in the burning bush.
Gideon and Samson's parents.
That was kind of God's voice speaking out of it. So
God's-
probably not an angel. Kuma, what was that?
Moses.
Gideon and Samson's parents.
Yes. Well, at least Samson's mother. In the end, the angel, in exasperation, has to speak to his boneheaded father. But yes, that's correct.
Have we mentioned the Abraham, the 3 guests that come to his tent?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we did. Someone did mention them.
Sorry, yeah.
The birth of Christ.
Prophets.
Yes.
Prophets did
Angels.
all. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel.
Yes, that's right. All of them saw angels. The answer to that's a bit of a trick question in some ways because angels appear all over the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. They're always popping in, saying things like, do not be afraid is their calling card as a rule. Now, your next angel trivia question is, how many types of angels are there in the Old Testament?
Do you mean by types?
There are types of angels.
Cherubims and seraphims.
Yes,
Yeah.
cherubim and seraphim. And what's the last type? This is the one that no one will probably get unless they paid attention to me in my sermons on the Old Testament, tugging on people.
Archangels, cherubs.
I was going to say archangels.
Nephilim.
No, the Nephilim are the children of mortals and angels. They're a different beastie. So they're half human, half angel.
Would it be
So,
Satan appearing as an angel?
no, he doesn't
No,
count because he was a
like
fallen
that.
angel. And this is the Old Testament we're talking about.
Well, what about archangels and cherubs?
Archangels, are they actually in the Old Testament?
Good point. I
No.
will retire.
No, they're not.
But cherubim are.
Cherubim are. And what's the other one that was said? Seraphim are. What's the third category? Oh, I'm being nasty here because they're the ones we just tend to call angels. Cherubim and seraphim get their Hebrew names. But when we're talking about angels, we're using an English term for a Hebrew word, which is malachim. So every time you see angel in the Old Testament, it's the malachim. So there's cherubim, seraphim, and the malachim. Now, the malachim are a bit harder to characterize because they tend to look like people, like when they visited Abraham and Sarah, for example. So there's 3 types of angels in the Old Testament, and by far the greatest interactions that humans have with angels are with the malachim. So now you know. Whenever you see that word angel in the Old Testament, it is one of the malachim. So what forms do the angels take? John's given you a bit of hint up there with these pictures.
Yeah, the seraphim were very, very odd looking.
Yes, well, that's kind of 2 depictions, I think, of seraphim there. They're meant to have 6 wings, 2 that cover their... What's covered with the seraphim? Can anyone remember? I'm not sure I can remember probably. 2 cover their feet, 2 cover their eyes, I think it is.
And 2 to fly with.
And their what, sorry?
And 2 to fly with.
Why did they
And 2
want
to
to cover
fly with,
their
that's right.
eyes?
I don't know. Maybe they can't look on the glory of God either. But yes, they cover things. And their feet, of course, is a euphemism. They're not covering their feet. They're covering other bits. So
All
the
right.
seraphim are quite strange creatures, and they're fire breathing, of course, in Isaiah 6. What about the cherubim? Do we know what they look like?
I always had the impression they look rather cute.
No, only if you're looking at Renaissance painters and
Right,
Michelangelo, who seem to turn them into little fluffy, rosy cheeked things.
Yeah.
Where is the cherubim mentioned in the Old Testament?
In Isaiah? No,
Sorry, what
no.
was that?
Isaiah?
No, that's the seraphim, Marjorie.
Oh, okay.
They're mentioned in Genesis. I'll give you a hint. Quite early on. And that wasn't a trick question. Who guards the garden when Adam and Eve are expelled from it?
The angel.
It's a cherubim with a flaming sword. That's one place they appear. Can anyone name me the second place the cherubim appear? And they're not alive, shall we say. They're images of the cherubim. Where are they?
On the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes, they sit on either side of the Ark of the Covenant. And we don't have a picture of the ark, but we have a descriptor of how the ark was meant to be built. And the cherubim on the ark, by the descriptor, look more like what we think of as angels today. Creatures that are humanoid with 2 or maybe 4 wings with I think it's 2 wings that kind of curl over their heads. They come over like that. Both wings over the top on the Ark of the Covenant. So, yes, they're your angels in the Old Testament, and that's where they apply. There is one other place where seraphim are mentioned. It's not well known, and that is in Numbers. If you remember the story of the fiery serpents biting the Israelites, and Moses Moses erects the bronze serpent. If they look at that, they're cured. The word that's actually translating serpents, that serpents is translating there, is seraphs. It's a variation of seraphs. So they're not just poisonous serpents, they're angelic and they're related to the seraphim. So seraphim are pretty nasty if they want to be. They don't just breathe fire and flames, but they can come down and do dreadful things if God decides there needs to be a plague sent among humanity. So when people are afraid of angels, there's a good reason. The cherub have flaming swords. The seraphim breathe fire and they're poisonous. So, and Malachim, obviously, if they're not in their human guise, must look a bit scary too, because they have to say to people, do not be afraid. Gabriel says that to Mary, for instance. He would be one of the Malachim, because the Greek angelos is directly translating the Hebrew Malachim.
So they could.
Well, there you go. We can get it.
Go
We're
away.
ready.
Go
We can get it.
Mark, I want to listen. Go away.
If they can't do it, we're ready.
That's what I just said to my daughter.
We're ready.
Go.
Well, you're scrolling it.
Right, that's fixed that once I tracked down who it was. Okay. So we're coming now to the ladder, and I think John's going to talk to you about that.
There's a book called there's a website, sorry, called My Jewish Learning, which I have rated over the years because it's got some interesting stuff in it, particularly a whole lot of material from rabbis over time. And there's a book called Ruach Chaim, which means the breath of life, which was written by a Rabbi Chaim of Volodzin, who lived from 1749 to 1821. He was a student of another rabbi called the Vilna Gaon, who was the preeminent sage of the Jews in Lithuania. And it is believed that his teacher was the one who really set the development of modern Judaism, like from the early 19th century onwards. So part of an influential school in Lithuania amongst Jews of the time. Anyway, Rabbi Haim writes, our sages come to teach us that we ought not to think that because of our base material, we are truly despicable, like mere plaster on a wall. This resonated with me because sort of fundamental to the Greek tradition, not the Jewish tradition, but the Greek tradition, is the idea that human beings are caught in the material world, and the material world is a lower, lesser, base kind of world, and that our life is a struggle to escape, to ascend into the heavens. Plato, of course, was really influential in arguing that, and then it gets picked up in all sorts of ways, including, you may recognize, in the New Testament. At any rate, Rabbi Haim says we are not truly despicable base material people. And he goes on to talk about this story. About this, it says, a ladder stationed on the earth, that is Sinai. Now, he's doing a typical rabbinic thing and reading into the text more than what it actually says, but he's saying that what the ladder that Jacob sees starts at Mount Sinai, which of course will be the place in the story where Moses receives the law. So the ladder stationed at Sinai, and its top reaches into the heaven. This represents our soul's life, which is in the highest sphere. There are even souls that see God. They are the highest of the high. They are higher than ministering angels. And by this status, the soul cleaves to Torah, which for rabbis, of course, is the fundamental element of knowing God, Torah, the law. A whole person is like a tree whose roots are above and whose trunk extends downward, which is the body, and which is fastened to its supernal roots. So he's kind of turning things upside down and saying we're actually rooted in heaven with God, and we come down into earth to learn Torah. There's a later writer in the 20th century, Pinchas Lysa, who wrote, Rabbi Haim of Volozhin views Torah learning as a Sinaitic event. Torah is what connects the heavens and the earth. So that's another kind of midrash on the story, that the ladder that's going, that the angels go up and down, is the Torah, the elements of the Torah. With Torah, one can ascend and descend between the two spheres. The people who do so are angel-like. So he's interpreting this story as being the angels are actually people who have so immersed themselves in Torah that they can ascend to be with God through their knowledge of Torah, their living of Torah, and then descend and return to earth. So we've got the story about the ladder. We've got what Rabbi Haim says in the 19th century, early 19th century. We've got Pinchas Lysa in the 20th century commenting, and this is my midrash on the midrash on the midrash. In the 21st century, this is a penetrating insight into the nature of human beings. We are not spiritual beings trapped in the prison of the material world, as Plato imagined, and as many others, including Paul, who was influenced by Plato's philosophy, wrote. But rather, we are fully nephesh, which is the word that's used in the Hebrew Bible to describe creatures of God. We are fully nephesh, creatures of God containing both material and spiritual characteristics. We belong to earth and we belong to heaven. The ladder which Jacob saw reveals this true nature. It tells us that we can transport ourselves between the two places if we would only open ourselves to the possibility. So Jacob's dream is a kind of archetype which demonstrates exactly who we are and how we can live. So that's a little bit of a foray into later rabbinic exposition of this passage, which I think raises some interesting things. The people who can ascend and descend between the two spheres are angel-like. So this is going to be our first breakout room discussion, I think, Elizabeth, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
What do you think of what the rabbi says? And do you see yourself in this way in your relationship with God? Okay. So they're the two questions for your small group discussion.
All right. How did you get on with the rabbi? Who agreed with the rabbi?
Well, I think most of us did in a way.
Yes. Would you like to illuminate that, Margaret?
No, I'm too tired.
All right.
I've been thinking about this all afternoon, to tell you the truth, because I read both your articles and I'm quite intrigued. So, but I think we find it really hard not to think in a dichotomy because of the teachings in the New Testament.
Yeah.
But what this is suggesting is that we belong to both heaven and earth. We're both bodily and spiritual beings, however we like to understand that. And I don't think it denies anything or precludes anything. I think it's just a fact. We're both spiritual and material beings. We're not either one or the other. That's my opinion, but I don't know how else to express it. It's too hard.
All right, that's fine. It's getting late. I get that. Anyone else have an opinion?
I think Revelations is significant in that I think it's saying that we're in two planes, and a spiritual plane and an earthly plane, and that we are saved from the moment we accept Christ as Lord and Saviour. It's not something we wait to the end for. Does that make sense?
Yes, though I'm not quite sure if Revelation is actually saying that, because it certainly has a new heaven and a new earth and a new Jerusalem. But it's the closest probably to the Hebrew concept that you'll get in the New Testament. That would be correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Because heaven comes to earth. It's not another sort of realm up in the sky somewhere. So, yes. Any other thoughts?
We discussed the idea of thin places.
Ah,
We're going to get to thin places.
Yes, right.
That's next on the list. We're going to do that. This is more about. Do you think that the rabbi's right that we're both of heaven and of earth, and we can kind of move between the two?
Yeah, we also discussed someone was working with people who were dying and they felt that they were in both places at once. And I was reminded of St. Francis of Assisi and the Indigenous idea of everything and everybody being connected.
Yeah.
The fact that within us we have the capacity for going up the ladder because we're made in the image of God, and we have part of God in us, and a lot of the time we yearn for and long and move in that direction, but we also have the capacity to go down the ladder. And sadly, each of us, and sometimes that results in very great tragedies. Thanks
for that, Marjorie.
It was just another metaphor of moving towards God.
Do you don't think, and this could be a trick question, is the concept of body and soul the same in the Old Testament as the New Testament? I know Margaret mentioned there's a dichotomy in the New Testament, and that's right, where you have this fleshly kind of container, the body, and in it is the soul, and it's kind of the soul that goes to heaven when you die. Is that what the Old Testament people believe?
No, it's
No.
completely a Greek
No.
idea.
It is a Greek thing. No, they
Yeah.
don't believe that. The Old Testament people believed in the concept of that word John's already used, and that's nephesh. Anyone work out what a nephesh is?
You told us, didn't you?
I
Yeah.
did at some point or another.
Yeah.
I did. And nephesh is used to describe the essence of life in both humans and animals. So animals can be nephesh as well. It's used in the Bible of all living creatures. Well, it's used in the Old Testament, let we say, of all living creatures. So, cattle, birds of the air have nephesh. What the nephesh actually is there's no dichotomy in Hebrew. There's no concept that you're a fleshly container with a soul in it, and the soul is somehow separate, and that's what ascends. No, you cannot get up here. That's the catch. Sorry. He's going to knock everything over. No, sorry, forbidden. A nephesh is different to that, because a nephesh is a body, whether it's a creature, a human or another creature, and it is given life by the breath of God, and it becomes an alive and living being. So when God breathes God's breath or spirit into a creature, they are nephesh. So there's no soul and there's no flesh that are dichotomies. The breath of God is in us, and our soul and our for want of a better word, because I can't think of a better word, the idea of a soul and flesh are completely intertwined. So they're like this in the Hebrew concept. It's not a container with a soul in it that's a spirit, and then there's flesh, which is material. They belong together, and when the breath of God is withdrawn, you die, or the creature dies. If you look at Psalm 104, that's probably the best and clearest illustration of that, when it says, when God breathes into them or puts his spirit into them, they live, and when it's withdrawn, they die. So the rabbi is technically right. We do belong to both earth and to heaven in the Old Testament, because we are nephesh. We are creatures of flesh that contains the breath of God or the Spirit of God, and that is what gives us life. So it's a little bit different to that New Testament concept that we got from the Greeks, and which really does dominate Christianity now as a belief system.
Elizabeth, question then, because I guess
Yes.
that's what I was struggling with, because the New Testament and the influence of the Greek philosophers moved right away from this idea of nephesh. Just can historically remind us when that began to change?
I think in the intertestamental period, it was coming towards the end of the post-exilic time, and you begin to get a number of things happen around the same time. God stops being the one God who sends good and evil, and you get this split of God into God and some form of the devil or Satan, and all the bad things go on to Satan, and all the light and love stay with God. So there was a reluctance to see for true monotheistic belief, which is that all good and all evil must come from the one God if there is only one of them. So we have the rise of Satan as this alternate figure that all the evil could be put onto. And then we have Jewish communities being badly persecuted in various ways by kings and overlords. And it gave rise to the idea that if you weren't being rewarded in this life, then there must somehow be some afterlife. And that's the only way God's justice could prevail. And that was certainly picked up by the Christians. So the concept of heaven and hell, you have it arise because of persecution, but firstly of the Jews and then, of course, of Christians. And if God is just and God is love, then why are righteous people being tortured and killed by these other horrible folk? Well, you can't explain that except to say your reward is in heaven. And the Gospel of Matthew, if you're following along with that in the lectionary, is very well. We will get. No, we're not up to it yet. Yeah, we're still
Yeah.
in. Are we
Yeah,
up
you
to
were
Matthew?
in,
Yeah,
We're
we
in
are
Matthew.
getting there.
Yeah, if you're following along with Matthew, you would know that he talks a lot about this concept. Your reward is in heaven. Don't worry about this earthly stuff because your reward is in heaven. And that's a big deal with the Gospel of Matthew. And it's a big deal with others that have this idea of heaven and hell. So and then, of course, if your body is being killed, then how do you get the reward in heaven? Well, you have a soul. And that's where the Greek philosophy comes in. You can borrow the Platonic idea that we are an earthly container with a soul in it, or a fleshly container. So it's from that late exilic period through the intertestamental period into the New Testament, these things kind of develop in parallel. And they all belong together. They're all a cluster. They're not the same, but they all belong to the same kind of phenomena, that we have to explain why this good God is allowing this rotten stuff to happen to us when we're righteous, faithful people.
Could I ask a question also?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to go back to what about the concept of body, soul, and spirit? Because that's what I've always thought we are, not just a body and a soul. I've never thought of the soul as being particularly spiritual. When God, the body, soul, and spirit, isn't that how we understand people?
I guess it depends on how you're defining spirit and what you mean by it, Marjorie, because there's no right or wrong answers on this.
It's the breath of God within us. I would have
Well,
thought
the breath of God isn't within us.
that's the nefesh that gives us life. I don't
It's
know.
in the Old Testament. It's not in the New. The New is really very much the soul and the body, especially if you're reading Paul's letters. Flesh is bad, and mind and spirit, as in soul, is good. Material things are bad, heavenly things are good. There really is polar opposites there. The breath of God in us is an Old Testament phenomena, but the soul isn't an Old Testament phenomena. So it's just kind of been a mixing of those two things, I think, Marjorie. And as I said, there's no right or wrong answer here. These are just how people have interpreted these things. It's not spelt out anywhere. This is what the right thing is.
Yes, and that's the well, we could talk all night. I better not say any more.
Yeah.
But
It really is a matter of how you interpret this yourself.
perhaps the other kind of thing to add in at this point is that all of this flux, all of this change and flux that's happening comes about after Israel has stopped being settled in the land. Now, being settled in the land had its own traumas because there was constant invasion and changes and so on. But once majority of people were taken to exile in Babylon and then others were taken to exile in Egypt, they were out of the land. They were exposed to other cultures, other languages. This is when Aramaic begins. This is when Alexander the Great eventually then conquers the world or the known Mediterranean world, and Greek becomes an influence. So there's a whole lot of different changes happening over about 200, 300, 400 years. And it's in the midst of this that ideas get thrown up into flux. So there's no one single change
No,
point, and there's
there
no
isn't.
one single thing that changes. It's a whole. We have the benefit of hindsight. We can stand many thousands of years later and look back and say there are lots of things going on. When you're caught in the turmoil
Middle
of the
of it.
middle of it, yeah, it's
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a very turbulent time, and you've got this constant evolution of how people understand themselves and God, and what it means to be rewarded or punished, what it means to have a just God or a loving God, and they have to sort that out.
Mm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they move this constant evolution. And we're still evolving, even though people say, well, the canon doesn't change and it's fixed. But the way we understand things is constantly evolving. And
And if
so
you
it
look at,
was then.
yeah, and the Old Testament itself reflects the changing in thinking, and two lines of thought running alongside each other, and one
Yeah.
claiming this is the right way and the other claiming no, this is the right way. So it goes all through the later part of the Old
Yeah,
Testament,
yeah.
Yeah, it does.
through the prophets.
Actually, that
Oh,
was
there's
one
all
of the
sorts.
things that was
Yeah, go on,
most,
Sherry.
the thing that was most surprising in my last class, with Sally, Introduction to the New Testament. We looked at the intertestamental period and the socio-political things that were happening, and just how much that influenced Christianity that we have today was
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
really
did.
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, yeah.
It absolutely did. And, things like the whole Maccabean story.
Yeah, why isn't Maccabees in our Bible? Like, everything makes so much more sense.
Because we're not Catholics.
Yeah, we're not Catholics. Just buy a Bible with an apocrypha.
Yeah, I've got
and
two or three of those.
yes, and you will have it there. But yes, that's the whole rise of starting to question, a really black and white prosperity kind of reward and punishment theology, because it's not working. And you've got martyrs with the Maccabean people, and I wouldn't say it's a new concept, but it's not a very common concept up to that point with the Jewish people. Yeah, so there's all sorts of things going on. And being exposed to Hellenism and having places like Alexandria, with the library, and you've got people like Josephus and Philo exposed to those sophisticated philosophies. And, people, when they emerged out of that kind of Judaism into Christianity, brought those ideas with them. So they were living in that world. That it just makes sense. Never think that people aren't influenced by their culture, or the Bible wasn't influenced by the culture around it. Yes, it was.
You
That's
can't,
right.
Many ways.
you can't separate language and culture.
No, you can't.
No,
You
no.
can't. That's right. So, a question we had, and I don't know that we need to go into broken rooms, was just how does the biblical use of nephesh, the question was, how does it illuminate our nature as God's creatures? I think rather I might ask you, does your understanding of your nature as a God's creature change with the concept of nephesh?
Well, it has over the years. This now is much closer to the way I think than I used to.
Yeah. Okay, Margaret, thanks. Anyone else got something they want to say about that?
In the Islamic belief system, the way they pray over an animal before they kill it, it shows to me that they believe that God is somehow within that animal.
Yes.
Indigenous people too have a ceremony or ritual where they thank the animal for giving its life so that they could eat.
Yeah. And it's quite common among pagans in today's world, especially those who hunt, and quite a number of them do. They will always thank an animal for giving its life, and they will use all of it out of respect to that animal, not just the bit they like eating, but they'll turn all of it into something its height, its, other things.
And the indigenous people of America and Australia as well.
Yes, that's right. Which is
I've been
probably
thinking a
where
bit about
paganism got it from, Maxine.
Yeah.
Indigenous people.
this is kind of a little bit of a side quest, but it's relevant. I've been thinking about things that aren't in the Bible that we accept as true. And the idea of being saved and saying a specific prayer and believing in Jesus and how that all kind of comes from Paul. Well,
Yes.
not the saying the sinner's prayer bit, but
Yeah.
that whole belief thing comes from Paul. But really, I talk to my Sunday school kids about living the Jesus way, not about being a Christian, because really Jesus was just on about feeding the poor and the
Yep.
hungry and looking after the disadvantaged. And nowhere does Jesus say you have to believe these dogmas. And so the idea of nephesh, of being a creature that's created by God, by the divine, that has that divine nature within us, is quite opposed in many ways to Paul's line of thinking.
Yep.
And I think we need to examine that a bit more. Well, I need to examine that a bit more.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was trying to say, Sherry. You've said it beautifully.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, that's right. Because Paul goes through about the flesh is weak.
Yeah.
The flesh is bad. The flesh is the thing that gets tempted. The flesh is the thing that lets us down.
Yeah.
Where the Hebrews would not agree with that at all. The flesh is just what you are with God-given breathed spirit in you. And that makes you a creature of or a child of the divine. And, that's an end of that. Where Paul would see that differently. And so the whole idea that, flesh is bad, sexuality is bad, any kind of pleasure that's to do with the flesh, whether it's eating or whether it's, going bathing in the sea or whatever, is somehow bad. That's where Puritanism got it from, Paul. Thanks, Paul. It's not a concept that you would have found with the Hebrews.
And let's face it, Elizabeth, it's coming right. It's right in our world now. In the way some people want to tell us how to live, which is flying in the face of this whole concept that a human being is a valued, person, a valued thing in the sight of God. Everything about us is, and including the way we think. Anyway. Yes, so we have to be, I think, careful about how we divide up between what is good and what is bad, which is what's happening around us all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we better push on. We're moving into thin places now that Sherry mentioned before, because Jacob is clearly in a thin place. So as John said, he's heading back to Haran. He's doing the opposite journey that his grandparents made. And as he goes through, he's travelling through the desert. And the encounter he has takes place in the wilderness. And this is an important thing to note. It's between civilization. It's between cities. There's no wall. There's no safety. It's a place that is wild. And the Hebrew actually calls it an open place. So that's telling you it's not a walled city. It's up for grabs, if you like. And it's such places that inevitably, if people are going to encounter God, it tends not to be in your upstairs apartment. It tends to be in one of these open places, these wild places between civilization. And the Bible, despite its penchant for wanting to order chaos, I mean, the whole Bible kicks off with God ordering chaos. And it's rather keen on that, because you find it's mentioned in the Psalms, order's good, chaos is bad. We find it in things like the story of Noah, and the story of Job, though. Chaos is used to disrupt in a good way, though that depends on how you want to view the flood. I mean, chaos certainly transforms, or it's meant to transform the earth. I don't know it works quite the way God intended, because he just throws his hands in the air eventually and says, I give up. And God, of course, disrupts Job's ordered worldview by appearing in a whirlwind to correct him about his black and white view of a just universe, and informing him instead it's much more morally ambiguous than he had previously thought. And it's full of random elements. Even the last day of judgment has lots of chaotic things happening, such as earthquakes, wars, famines, etc. So one of the things that I've always used to tell people in sermons, it's a dangerous thing to encounter the living God of the Judaic tradition. He is not safe. So here is Jacob in this place, and the Celtic mystics talked of such wild places and called them thin places, a place where the veil between heaven and earth momentarily would become thin or lifted, and there would be a glimpse of the divine. And they're always transformative when they happen. So I wrote actually an essay on one of my degrees on thin places, and I had a nice quote from a contemporary poet called Charlandi Sledge, and she says, thin places, the Celts call this space, both seen and unseen, where the door between the world and the next is cracked open for a moment, and the light is not all on the other side. God-shaped space, holy. Which I thought was a rather nice way of summing up what a thin place is. So our next discussion with you in your rooms is think about whether or not you've had the experience of finding yourself in a thin place. And if so, what happened? Was it transformative for you? And in what ways? So I'm going to pop you in your breakout rooms to talk about this for a bit. Well, welcome back. Does anyone wish to share anything of their groups? I'm not insisting anyone do anything. It might have been something you just wanted to talk to your group about, your thin place experience. But if you would like to share, you're very welcome to.
You were saying about how God changed your prayer. I thought that was very, I don't know, just, I don't know, special.
I think there are times when you really feel that God is communicating with you. And when my father was dying, I kept praying, don't let my daddy die, don't let my daddy die. And we were travelling home from the hospital. And when we got level with Rydalmere Hospital, I realised the prayer had changed. Be with my daddy. And I think that was a thin place. And he was speaking to me and saying, it's all right, I'm with him. I don't know. I just think that it's not necessarily great, extraordinary things that happen, but things that significantly, I guess, prove to you that God is indeed a loving, caring God.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think often thin places are transformative, not because they're like, the Transfiguration, but because they're quiet and they bring something really still to you in the form of presence.
Yes.
And that's what changes you. Yeah.
It's not like some sort of affirmation of not necessarily what's happening, but affirmation that God is there and you are loved, and whatever is happening, God is there.
Yeah.
which is almost beyond putting into words.
It is hard
Mm.
to put into words, I think, if
Mm.
you've had those kinds of experiences. It's difficult
Mm. Mm.
because they are about presence and they're about the impact of that presence on you rather
Mm.
than something spectacular like a volcano erupts or something like that nearby.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
While you were talking about thin places earlier, I was thinking about Halloween, not the dress up and get lollies Halloween, but the All Hallows Eve, where, is it I forget who. I've heard stories about traditional people thinking that the barrier between this world and the next becomes thinner, and
Mm.
Yes, that's correct. It's known as Samhain in the pagan tradition
what's it
of
called?
Europe, and Samhain, Samhain. It's Gaelic, so it's pronounced nothing like it's spelt. Samhain.
Yeah, of course.
It's spelt Sam Hain. Samhain is a pagan festival that predates Christianity from the British Isles, or particularly places like Ireland and Scotland and parts of Europe. And it was believed that was when the veil thinned between the living and the dead, and your ancestors could visit you on that night, and that things from like fairies and other things could be more present and visible in the human world than they normally were. That's where the Halloween costumes come from, this kind of concept that things roamed around, and people would put a lantern out to guide the ancestors home or set a meal for them at the table. And it was and it kind of morphed into All Hallows Eve, because the church nicked it. Let's face it, if you've got a big pagan thing happening, the church wants in on it and they just take it over.
Yep.
And they turned it into All Hallows Eve. And because of our current Halloween traditions of kids dressing up and trick or treating is really based on the old pagan version, but it's a hybrid of modern day things and these older traditions that predate Christianity. So yes, what you heard is correct. That's
How do you spell that word again, please?
Samhain. Phonetically, it would be Sam Hain. It's pronounced Samhain, because nothing in Gaelic sounds like the English letters that write it. Nothing. I've been trying to learn it, and I can tell you now, it's almost impossible. Because you listen to it and you look at what's written, you think, how did they get that? How does that work? Anyway, so yes, it was one of the big fire festivals of Ireland, Bealtaine and Imbolc, which is St. Bridget's festival. She used to be a goddess, and the Catholic Church changed her into a saint again, because she was so popular, they couldn't get rid of her. So that was the best way of dealing with her. And indeed, there may have been Bridgets around, because every second woman was named after the goddess in Ireland. So there may have been a real St. Bridget, but the two kind of meshed together to create what's known as St. Bridget now. And a lot of the old traditions came with her, like an eternal flame and guarding wells and other things like that. So you can't half tell I've been studying Irish paganism, can you?
It's all very interesting and feeds into how our traditions have evolved.
Absolutely, it feeds into. Never think Christianity wasn't influenced by the pagans they found and colonized. They were. And the church is very good at taking over those festivals that were popular and those figures that were popular. Anyway, we better finish off with a relationship with God, John.
Yeah, we'll move into the last section. And it occurs to me that at some stage during this series, and tonight and now is probably the moment, I think, when it's worth saying this, we're looking at stories from long, long ago that talk about a people that came to be known as Israel. Of course, in the modern world, that word Israel, especially in the last couple of years, has got all kinds of connotations. So on the one hand, there is the contemporary nation state of Israel. In theory, a secular society, but a society in which really conservative, fundamentalist religious forces are driving political decisions. And since the Gaza genocide began, talking about Israel is fraught because of the terrible policies that Netanyahu and his mob are perpetrating. Now, of course, there's Hamas and there's Iran and there's a whole network of complications in the Middle East and in the religious scene as well as the political scene. But that's not the point. The point is that in the modern world, Israel is a loaded term, and people have, rightly, I think, a very negative view of Israel. Now, our problem is that on the other hand, we have these stories from the past, from long before Christianity, about the nation that comes to be known as Israel. And it's from that nation, from those people, that Christianity emerges. And the relationship of Christianity to Israel is an interesting and also complex, multi-layered kind of relationship. And a part of what's happened in Christianity, and this became really dominant by the Middle Ages, was that Judaism was devalued, was downplayed. Israel, Israelites, Jews were denigrated, were persecuted. And of course, in our own time, we can see the culmination of this was in the Shoah, the Holocaust, in the middle of the 20th century. So we need to be really careful not to take on board that strong stream within traditional Christianity of viewing Judaism, Israel negatively, ancient Israel and Jewish faith. Now, this plays out in all kinds of stereotypes. And one of the stereotypes is, well, Jews were alienated from God. They didn't have access to God. They had to go through the priests. They had to bring lots of sacrifices to the temple. It was very expensive. Only a few people could afford it. The priests were gatekeepers that kept them, only allowed few people access to God. The law was a great heavy burden that pressed upon them day, but the stereotypes just multiply.
That's very Catholic, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, it spread across the Christian church.
It started with the Catholics because initially there was only the Catholic
Well, yeah,
Church.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, since the 1940s, there has been a rethinking of this, starting in the Catholic Church, actually, with Nostra Aetate, and then through a whole lot of other denominations, including the Uniting Church, which has got a really good statement about it. So what we have here in this story about ancient Israel is a story about a man and his intense, positive relationship with God. Now, he was the precursor of the Jews, and from the line of Jacob, Israel, comes Moses and comes the giving of the law, that law which is allegedly a great burden on people, that law which keeps people apart from God that needs Jesus to break in and open up access in traditional Christian theology. But this story is about a person who had a dream, and in that dream has a vision of God. And the story goes on past the dream to say that what God promises to be with Jacob. And the angels actually, by chapter 31, we're in chapter 28 here, by chapter 31, the angels are still with Jacob. They travel with him as he goes up to Haran and then back down south to Canaan. In other words, God doesn't give up on him. There's an ongoing and intensifying relationship. So the story ends with, or comes to a climax in my mind, with a strong sense of the enduring and faithful nature of God accompanying people of faith throughout their lives, all of which is a lead up, to the question, pushed the wrong button, all of which is a lead up to the question, which for me jumps out as I think about the story that way. Can we have a relationship with God without Jesus? Can
Yes.
we express our spirituality in ways other than through
Through
Jesus,
Jesus.
through church, through Christianity?
Mm.
So there we go. Nice, easy, simple question. A yes, no question to end up
Uh,
with. No, not at all.
uh,
Any takers?
Yes.
Jesus came to tell us what God was really like, didn't he? He came to reveal the truth, the reality.
I'm not disputing the importance of Jesus, but is Jesus the one and only revelation of God and the one and only way that we get access to God? That's the question, I guess.
I believe that we're told that Jesus is the judge, but we're not told how he will judge. So,
Well, yeah, if you read Matthew 25, Pat.
yeah, go on. What are you specifically saying?
Well, Jesus comes on his clouds with his trumpets and his angels, and he calls all the nations, and he stands before them, and he says, the ones who did this are going to heaven, and the ones who did this are off to hell. That's as judgy as you can get.
I'm not disputing he is the judge. What I'm saying is we don't know the terms that he is going to judge us on. Therefore, I believe that people who genuinely love God and seek to do his will, whether they're Jewish, Islamic, or whatever, God will judge them on his terms, not what we imagine are our terms, which is, unless you're a Christian, you won't get through the gates of heaven. I don't know that I believe that. I believe
That's
that
my point, Pat, about reading Matthew, because he says, if you do this, you will go to heaven. The terms are quite clear in it. And it doesn't mention faith, not once.
but
I always found that very interesting.
That's true.
I love Matthew 25. He's the antidote to Paul, the only antidote we
I
have
was just
to
thinking
Paul.
that.
Yes, but it's quite, Jesus is really clear what the terms are there, really clear.
But is that Jesus or is that Matthew getting his point across?
It's probably Matthew, but he puts it in the mouth of Jesus. And how do we know exactly what Jesus did and didn't say?
Exactly. We can only look at his life and the way it's recorded that he treated people. But that's all we've got. We really don't know what he said and what it's all about.
We can make some probably educated guesses, I think, about what he said, but they are just educated guesses.
Yeah,
look at that looking cat with John. That's the one that was trying to knock my iPad off the chair. This one.
Hey,
Felix.
He's beautiful.
Yes. So yes, but it's a good question, because all through the Old Testament we find plenty of people who have very close relationships with God, starting with Adam and Eve, and then Abraham, and then all of Abraham's descendants, and working way up to the prophets and people like that. They obviously all had access to God.
Relationship.
Yeah.
Even in the New Testament, whether Jesus actually said what he said, what Matthew says he said, word for word, the themes are the same through all the Gospels. If someone says, how do I get to heaven or get eternal life or whatever, Jesus' answer is always look after the needy, feed the hungry, visit the sick.
They're the things can't change because they come out all through the gospel writings, as
Yes.
accurate or not as they may be. Some things
But there must be
stand out.
some truth buried in there.
I think
Absolutely.
there is.
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
that it's so uniformly reported across all four Gospels, even John talks
Mm.
about this,
Mm.
that it'd be highly unlikely, I think, that Jesus didn't teach such things. How
That's
he
right.
exactly
That's what I was
worded
trying to
it,
say.
we probably don't know. But I think it's very clear that Jesus had a great heart for the underprivileged and the oppressed
Yep.
and those who were going without in society.
And basically saying, this is the way. You know, this is how I'm teaching you. So whatever you do
Yeah.
to each other in the name of God, you are doing to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is basically back to Matthew 25.
Yeah, I
Um,
know. You can't
yeah.
escape some of the way it's been put.
There is no way you're going to eliminate Matthew 25 from my canon, Margaret. I insist on clinging to it.
Oh, well,
It
you have
is
every right.
it is slightly different in the Gospel of John.
Mm.
Yeah, I was thinking
The
John
Gospel of
3:16.
John
I'd
is
like to delete that verse.
the Gospel of John is probably the closest gospel we have to Pauline teachings, I think,
Mm.
because the emphasis is different from the synoptics.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, we're past time,
Yeah.
and that can be your pondering for the week further on that
Mm.
question.
Or you can go and read our various blogs if you're really desperate for something to do in your free time. Mine's about thin places. John's is
It's
about
very good.
stuff. Oh, you read it, have you?
Yes, I
Yeah,
did.
Oh, thank you,
absolutely.
Margaret.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
So
Folks.
next week we're continuing the anything but ordinary, and we've got another marriage. It's the wrong sister
Ooh.
story. The very next
Meet
chapter,
a
Genesis
character
20.
as treacherous and sneaky as Laban.
Okay.
We'll see you next week.